Every morning at 7:30, Robert Walsh walked into Miller's cafe. At 78, he moved slowly, leaning on his wooden cane, his gray cardigan worn at the elbows. He always sat at the same corner table by the window, where he could watch the morning light spread across the street. And every morning Annie Chen was there to greet him. "Good morning, Mr. Walsh," she'd say with a warm smile, already pouring his coffee just the way he liked it. 2 creams, 1 sugar. "The usual today?" "You know me too well, dear," Robert would reply, his weathered face crinkling into a smile. Annie was 32, a waitress who'd been working at Miller's for 6 years. She wore her light brown hair pulled back in a neat ponytail, and her cream blouse and red skirt were always pressed and tidy, even though she worked double shifts most days to support her aging mother who lived with her. In a small apartment across town, Robert had been coming to Miller's for 3 years, ever since his wife Margaret passed away. Most mornings he'd sit alone with his newspaper and his thoughts. But gradually he and Annie had formed a quiet friendship. She'd refill his coffee without being asked, remember his stories about his late wife, and listen when he needed to talk. "How's your mother doing?" Robert would ask. "She's having a good week, thank you for asking," Annie would reply. "The new medication seems to be helping with her memory." Robert always left a generous tip, sometimes more than the meal itself cost. Annie tried to refuse at first, but he'd insist. "You remind me of my Margaret," he'd say. She had that same kindness in her eyes. One Tuesday morning, everything changed. Robert was finishing his oatmeal when a man in an expensive navy suit walked through the cafe door. He was in his late 30s, with dark hair styled perfectly and an air of authority that made the room take notice. Behind him walked 2 other men carrying leather briefcases. The man in the suit scanned the cafe until his eyes landed on Robert. His expression hardened. "Grandfather," he said, his voice cold. Robert looked up, his hand trembling slightly on his coffee cup. "Daniel, what are you doing here?" Annie, who was wiping down a nearby table, felt a chill run through the room. Daniel Walsh pulled out a chair and sat down without being invited. The 2 men with briefcases stood behind him. "We need to talk. I've been trying to reach you for weeks." "I have nothing to say to you," Robert said quietly. "That's unfortunate," Daniel replied, "because I have plenty to say to you." He glanced at Annie with barely concealed disdain. "Could we have some privacy?" Annie started to move away, but Robert reached out and gently touched her hand. "Stay, please. Annie's a friend." Daniel's jaw tightened. "A friend?" "Grandfather, do you know what people are saying? That you're being taken advantage of? That this waitress has been manipulating you?" Annie's face flushed. "I would never—" "I've seen the credit card statements," Daniel continued, cutting her off. "Hundreds of dollars in tips, money orders, gifts. My lawyers here have advised me that this constitutes elder exploitation." The cafe had gone quiet. Other patrons were watching now. Robert's hand shook as he set down his cup. "Daniel, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly," Daniel interrupted. "You're lonely, vulnerable, and she's taking advantage of that." He turned to Annie. "How much have you gotten from him? 5,000? 10? Tears welled in Annie's eyes. "Mr. Walsh has been kind to me, that's all. I never asked him for anything." "Really?" Daniel pulled a folder from his briefcase and slapped it on the table. "These are bank records. Money transfers to your account. A check for $3,000 just last month." Annie's voice was barely a whisper. "That was for my mother's medical bills. Mr. Walsh found out she needed surgery and insisted on helping. I tried to refuse." "I'm sure you did," Daniel said sarcastically. "That's enough." Robert's voice rang out with surprising strength. The cafe fell completely silent. "Daniel, you will not speak to her that way." "Grandfather, I'm trying to protect you." "Protect me?" Robert's eyes flashed with an emotion Annie had never seen before, anger mixed with deep sadness. "Where were you when Margaret died? Where were you during the funeral? I called you 17 times that week. 17 times, Daniel. You sent flowers and a card." Daniel's confident expression faltered. "I was closing a business deal in Singapore." "You're always closing a deal," Robert said, his voice breaking. "You haven't visited once in 3 years, not once. Do you know who sat with me on Margaret's birthday? Who reminded me to take my medication when I was too grief-stricken to remember?" Who listened when I cried? He gestured to Annie, who was wiping tears from her cheeks. It was Annie, this young woman, who works 2 shifts a day to care for her sick mother, who makes barely enough to get by. She took time to care about a lonely old man. She never asked for a single thing. I gave that money because I wanted to, because she needed it and because she deserved it. Daniel's face had gone red. Grandfather, you're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years, Robert interrupted. You want to talk about exploitation? You haven't called me in 8 months, but the moment you saw some money leaving my account, suddenly you're concerned about my welfare. He shook his head slowly. You're not here because you care about me, Daniel. You're here because you're worried about your inheritance. The words hung in the air like a judgment. One of the lawyers cleared his throat. Mr. Walsh, perhaps we should discuss this privately. No, Robert said firmly. I want everyone here to hear this, especially Annie. He turned to her, his eyes soft. My dear, I'm sorry you had to witness this. You've shown me more, genuine kindness in 3 years, than my own grandson has shown in a decade. Annie knelt beside his chair, taking his weathered hand in hers. Mr. Walsh, you don't have to explain anything to me. Your friendship has meant the world to me. That's worth more than any money. Robert patted her hand. I know, dear. That's exactly why I want you to have something. He looked at Daniel. I've already changed my will. The house, the investments, they're going to charity. The cafe, though. I bought this building 2 months ago. As of today, Annie Chen is the new owner of Miller's Cafe. The room erupted in gasps. Annie's eyes went wide. What? Mr. Walsh, I can't. You can and you will, Robert said gently. You've earned it with every kind word, every patient conversation, every moment of genuine care. This place has been your life. Now it can be your future. Daniel stood abruptly, his face twisted with rage and disbelief. This is insane. I'll contest the will. Try it, Robert said calmly. These gentlemen can testify that I'm of sound mind. So can everyone in this cafe. So can my doctor, my banker, and the 3 lawyers who helped me draw up the new papers. He smiled. Unlike you, Daniel, I planned ahead. Daniel grabbed his briefcase, his jaw clenched so tight it looked painful. You're making a huge mistake. No, Robert said quietly. My mistake was not seeing you clearly sooner. My only regret is that Margaret isn't here to meet. Annie, they would have been wonderful friends. Daniel stormed out, his lawyers hurrying behind him. The moment the door slammed, the cafe broke into spontaneous applause. Annie was crying openly now, overwhelmed. Mr. Walsh, I don't know what to say. Say you'll keep making the best coffee in town, Robert replied with a gentle smile. And that you'll still have breakfast with an old man who's finally learned what family really means. Annie hugged him carefully, and Robert patted her back the way a grandfather would. Around them, the other regulars, people who'd watched this daily friendship blossom, smiled with tears in their own eyes. True kindness, they all understood, is never wasted. Sometimes it's rewarded in ways we never imagine, and sometimes it reminds us that family isn't always about blood. It's about who shows up, who cares, and who loves us when we need it most. Robert Walsh had found that family in the most unexpected place. A corner table at Miller's Cafe with a waitress who'd simply chosen to be kind.